Welcome to Famous People, English Stories. Ready to level up your English? Here we learn through stories slow, clear, and fun. Listen, relax, and enjoy the journey.
Introduction. In this story, you'll follow a young woman as she discovers the secrets of how to sound natural in English. Stay with us until the end. Each chapter reveals a new lesson, and every challenge she faces brings her one step closer to speaking confidently and naturally. Now it's your turn. What do you find hardest about sounding natural when you speak English? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's learn from each other and improve, one conversation at a time. Chapter 1. The Dream of Speaking English Like a Native. Emma sat quietly in her small apartment, the soft glow of the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the wooden floor. Her desk was cluttered with notebooks filled with English vocabulary, grammar exercises, and highlighted phrases she had painstakingly collected over the years. She stared at her laptop screen, scrolling through dozens of job postings from international companies. Each listing felt like a tiny doorway to the future she dreamed of. Working abroad, meeting people from different countries, and speaking English as naturally as she spoke her native language. But despite all her preparation, Emma carried a quiet worry deep inside her chest. She had studied English for over 10 years. She had memorized grammar rules, drilled verb tenses, and learned thousands of words. Her pronunciation was clear, and her sentences were mostly correct. Yet every time she spoke English out loud, she felt like something was missing. Her words came out stiff, slow, and unnatural, like a recording played too carefully. I don't just want to be correct, she thought. I want to sound natural. I want to speak English the way people really do, not just what's in the textbooks. Emma remembered her last video call with a recruiter from a well-known multinational company. She had prepared answers carefully, rehearsing her introduction and work experience repeatedly. She spoke slowly, making sure to pronounce every word clearly. But the recruiter often interrupted her with quick questions, sometimes looking confused or distracted. Emma noticed that, even after all her efforts, the conversation didn't flow like a real dialogue. It felt more like an exam. After the call, Emma felt frustrated and discouraged. She wondered if she would ever be able to speak English with the natural rhythm and ease that native speakers had. Sometimes she compared herself to friends who had grown up speaking English or lived abroad for years. Their speech was smooth and relaxed, full of expressions and idioms that made them sound friendly and approachable. Maybe I'm just not good enough, she whispered to herself, feeling the weight of doubt settle in. But Emma was determined not to give up. She opened her journal and began to write. I want to speak English like a native. Not just to be understood, but to connect with people. To express myself freely, with emotion and confidence. I want my English to sound like music, not a machine. She paused and looked out the window. The city streets were busy with people chatting, laughing, and living their daily lives. English was everywhere, in the signs, on the radio, and in the voices of tourists she sometimes heard on the street. Emma realized that sounding natural was not about memorizing rules. It was about capturing the spirit of the language, its rhythm, its flow. The next day, Emma made a promise to herself. Instead of focusing only on grammar and vocabulary drills, she would explore how real people spoke English in everyday life. She would listen more, listen to the way native speakers talked, how they used contractions like I'm instead of I am, how they paused between words, how their voices rose and fell. Emma also decided she would start speaking more, even if it meant making mistakes. She knew that practice was key, but she needed to practice the right way, practicing natural English, not just textbook sentences. That morning, Emma called her best friend and told her about her new plan. "I want to sound natural, not perfect," she said excitedly. "I want to learn English like people really speak it, with all the little sounds and expressions." Her friends smiled and said, "That's the best way to learn. Real English isn't perfect. It's real. You'll get there." Emma smiled back, feeling a small spark of hope. She wasn't alone in this journey. Many had struggled and succeeded before her. She just had to find the right path. Her first step was simple but powerful: to listen more carefully and to speak more freely. To stop being afraid of sounding different or making mistakes. To embrace the language as a living thing. Little did Emma know, this decision would open doors she hadn't imagined. She would meet new people who would become her teachers and friends. She would discover the joy of English not just as a subject, but as a way to connect with the world. Her dream to speak English naturally was no longer just a distant hope. It was becoming a real journey, one full of challenges, surprises, and growth. Emma was ready to begin. Chapter 2: Finding her voice in the noise. Emma's days quickly filled with new habits. Instead of just reading and writing English, she started immersing herself in its sounds, rhythms, and moods. Every morning, she would listen to English podcasts, not just any podcasts, but conversations between friends, interviews, and everyday chats where people spoke naturally, not rehearsed or formal. At first, it was confusing. The speed was fast, and words blended together like a flowing river. She found herself rewinding again and again, catching small expressions and intonations she hadn't noticed before. The difference between I'm gonna and I am going to, the soft dropping of the T and don't, and the way people used contractions as if they were one word, not two. Emma realized the real English wasn't in the textbooks, it was in these tiny sounds and patterns. She practiced repeating sentences aloud, focusing on copying not just the words but the melody. She tried to imitate the rise and fall of voices, the pauses, the speed. She learned about linking sounds, where words connect in speech, how going to becomes gonna, and what are you sounds like whatcha. But progress wasn't always smooth. There were moments when Emma stumbled over tricky sounds or felt frustrated that her tongue wouldn't move as quickly as she wanted. Some days, she felt shy speaking aloud alone in her apartment, worried about sounding silly or awkward. One afternoon, Emma met Sarah at the local library, a fellow English learner she had met online. Sarah was from Brazil, and she, too, struggled with sounding natural. Together, they practiced short dialogues, correcting each other gently. Sarah showed Emma how native speakers sometimes shorten words or use slang in casual conversations. Emma learned expressions like "no worries," "hang on," and "catch you later," phrases she hadn't heard in her classroom lessons. These sessions became a highlight of Emma's week. They laughed over mistakes, shared stories about their learning journeys, and grew more confident together. Emma noticed that with Sarah's help, her English started to feel less like a series of perfect sentences and more like a living, breathing conversation. To take it further, Emma started watching TV shows and movies in English without subtitles. At first, it was overwhelming. Characters spoke quickly, with accents and idioms she didn't understand. But slowly, she began catching familiar phrases and pronunciation patterns. She mimicked scenes, repeating lines with the same tone and emotion, trying to sound like the characters. Emma realized that sounding natural was more than just correct grammar. It was about emotion, rhythm, and feeling comfortable with imperfection. It was okay to pause, to stumble, even to laugh at herself. One day, while practicing with Sarah, Emma said a sentence smoothly and confidently for the first time. Sarah smiled and said, "See? You're getting there. You're starting to sound like a real speaker." Emma smiled back, feeling a warm glow of pride. The road ahead was long, but now she knew the secret wasn't perfection, it was connection. Emma was not just learning English anymore, she was finding her own voice within it. Chapter 3: The Power of Listening and Shadowing. Emma's excitement about her progress grew, but so did the realization that there was still a long way to go. She knew that listening carefully was key, not just hearing English, but really understanding its flow and feeling its rhythm. One rainy afternoon, Emma sat by her window, headphones on, listening to a popular English podcast where two friends chatted casually about their day. She noticed how they didn't speak in perfect sentences. They used fillers like and like. At first, these sounds had seemed like mistakes or interruptions to Emma, but now she understood they were part of natural speech, pauses that helped people think or keep the conversation flowing. Emma decided to try a technique she'd read about called shadowing. It meant listening to a short sentence or phrase and immediately repeating it aloud, trying to match the speaker's speed, tone, and rhythm exactly. It wasn't easy. Her first attempts felt clumsy. She sometimes spoke too fast or too slow, her voice flat or too loud. But she kept at it, repeating lines over and over, trying to copy not just the words, but the feeling behind them. There were moments when she felt frustrated, her tongue tangled around unfamiliar sounds, and she wondered if she'd ever get it right. But each time she pushed herself to try again. She shadowed conversations from movies, podcasts, and interviews. Sometimes she recorded herself and compared it to the original, noticing where she could improve. Slowly, her voice began to sound more natural, more expressive. She learned to soften her pronunciation where necessary, and to emphasize the right words to make her sentences sound more alive. One day, while practicing shadowing, Emma realized she was starting to think in English. She wasn't translating from her native language anymore, she was hearing, understanding, and responding directly in English. This was a huge step. The words weren't just symbols on a page, they were alive in her mind. Emma's confidence grew. She started to speak more during her online conversation group, trying to use the fillers and expressions she'd learned. She stopped worrying so much about being perfect and focused on keeping the conversation alive. But challenges remained. In a group meeting, when a native speaker suddenly switched topics or used a phrase Emma hadn't heard before, she felt lost. She realized that natural speech wasn't just about pronunciation. It was also about understanding slang, cultural references, and humor. At first, this felt discouraging. She wondered if she would ever be able to keep up with native speakers or understand jokes that relied on cultural knowledge she didn't have. Emma made a new goal: to expose herself to English in many different forms: news, music, movies, podcasts, and casual conversations, to build a deeper understanding of the language and its culture. She realized that learning to sound natural was not just a language skill but a cultural journey. She also learned to ask for clarification during conversations, not fearing it as a sign of weakness, but embracing it as a tool for better communication. "What do you mean by that?" she would ask, or "Could you say that again, please?" These simple phrases helped her stay engaged and showed others she cared about understanding them fully. One evening, Emma sat down and wrote in her journal, "I'm learning to listen, to speak, and to connect." Sounding natural isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. It's about making mistakes and learning from them. It's about slowing down when needed and speeding up when I'm excited. It's about feeling comfortable enough to say, or because real conversations aren't always smooth. This journey is about finding my voice in a language that is new but becoming familiar. Her journey was still unfolding, and Emma was ready to face whatever came next, step by step, sound by sound. Chapter 4: Stepping Out of the Comfort Zone. Emma knew that all the listening, shadowing, and practicing alone would only take her so far. The real test was speaking with others, in real time, without scripts, without pauses to think too long. But the idea of speaking naturally to strangers made her heart race. One day, she decided to push herself. She signed up for a local language exchange event at a nearby community center. The flyer promised a relaxed atmosphere where people from all over the world could meet, chat, and practice English. When Emma arrived, the room buzzed with energy. Groups of people stood around, laughing, gesturing, speaking English with accents from every corner of the globe. For a moment, Emma felt overwhelmed. Her palms were sweaty, and her voice caught in her throat. She reminded herself of the promise she made, to focus on connection, not perfection. Taking a deep breath, she introduced herself to a small group. The words came out slowly at first, then smoother as the conversation warmed up. The people she met were friendly and patient. They didn't judge her for mistakes. Instead, they smiled, corrected gently when needed, and encouraged her to keep going. Emma noticed that when she relaxed and allowed herself to be imperfect, the conversations felt easier and more enjoyable. She found herself laughing and sharing stories, using the slang and idioms she had learned. "I'm totally hooked," she said aloud during one chat. The phrase came naturally, and she felt proud. Over the next weeks, Emma made it a habit to attend these events, joining different groups, meeting new people. Each time, she grew more confident, more comfortable in her own English skin. She also started volunteering as a conversation partner for newer learners. Helping others made her realize how far she had come and gave her a new sense of purpose. Teaching phrases like "what's up" or "no worries" became fun. Of course, there were still moments of awkward silence, misunderstandings, and mispronunciations. But Emma learned to embrace these as part of the process. Each mistake was a stepping stone. One evening, after a lively discussion, a native speaker told Emma, "You speak really naturally now. It's like chatting with a friend." Emma smiled, feeling a warm glow inside. This was the moment she had worked for, not just speaking English, but connecting with people through it. She knew the journey wasn't over. There would always be new words to learn, new accents to understand, and new situations to navigate. But now, she had found her courage, and with it, her voice. Emma was ready to keep stepping out of her comfort zone, one conversation at a time. Chapter 5: Beyond Words, Understanding Culture and Context. As Emma's confidence in speaking English grew, she discovered something important. Sounding natural wasn't just about the right pronunciation or grammar. It was also about understanding the culture behind the language. One evening, after a conversation with her new friends, Emma realized she had missed a joke. The group had been laughing, but she hadn't understood why. She felt a little embarrassed and asked, "Can someone explain that to me?" Her friends smiled warmly and took turns explaining the humor, referencing movies, historical events, and common sayings she hadn't encountered before. Emma realized that jokes, sarcasm, and even small talk often depended on shared cultural knowledge. Determined to learn more, Emma started watching English-language TV shows, not just to mimic accents, but to observe how people behaved in different situations. She noticed how Americans greeted each other casually with "How's it going?" but didn't always expect a detailed answer. She saw how British humor often relied on irony and understatement, something she found tricky at first. Emma also learned about polite expressions and social customs. For example, how Americans might say sorry even when it wasn't really their fault, just to be polite or soften a situation. Or how in some English-speaking countries, small talk about the weather was a way to connect before deeper conversations. She practiced these social norms in her conversations, noticing how they made interactions smoother and more relaxed. Emma learned to listen not just to words, but to tone, body language, and timing. One day, during a video chat with Sarah, Emma shared her discoveries. "It's like English is a code, not just a language," she said. "If you don't know the rules, you can't really understand what's being said." Sarah agreed and added, "And the code changes depending on where you are and who you're talking to. It's part of the fun and the challenge." Emma found joy in this deeper layer of learning. She began reading books and articles about cultural differences and etiquette, eager to understand not just how to speak, but when and why people said certain things. This new awareness helped her avoid misunderstandings and feel more connected in conversations. It also made her realize that language learning was more than memorizing vocabulary. It was about becoming part of a community. As Emma wrote in her journal that night, "To sound natural, I need to understand more than words. I need to learn the culture, the jokes, the pauses, the things left unsaid." English is alive because of the people who speak it. Her journey was evolving from mastering sounds to mastering meaning. Emma was not just learning English. She was learning to belong. Chapter 6: Finding Your Own Voice. As Emma's understanding of natural English deepened, she faced a new, unexpected challenge: how to be truly herself while speaking a language that was still foreign. For months, Emma had focused on imitation. She had shadowed native speakers' accents and intonations, memorized popular phrases, and practiced repeating them until they sounded just right. This method helped her sound fluent and confident, but it also left her feeling like a copy, not an original. One rainy afternoon, after a long video call with Sarah, Emma shared a worry she had been carrying for a while. "Sometimes, I feel like I'm just acting," she confessed. "Like I'm performing English instead of really speaking it. What if I lose my own way of expressing myself?" Sarah listened carefully and replied, "Emma, that's something every language learner goes through. But remember, your accent, your expressions, and your way of speaking, they're part of who you are. You don't have to erase your identity to speak English well. Your voice matters." Those words echoed in Emma's mind for days. She began to rethink her approach. Emma decided to experiment. Instead of trying to sound like the native speakers she admired, she started to speak with her own rhythms and intonations. She allowed herself to pause, to laugh naturally, to express feelings with her own tone, not the perfect one she had been aiming for. At first, it felt strange. When she spoke with her own style, she sometimes stumbled or wondered if others would understand her. But gradually, she noticed something surprising. People responded to her authenticity. They listened more closely, smiled more warmly, and engaged more deeply. Emma realized that natural English wasn't about perfection or imitation. It was about communication, and communication happens best when you are genuine. She also began to embrace her accent as a unique part of her identity. Instead of hiding it, Emma saw it as a bridge connecting her past and her present. Her accent carried her story, her culture, and her experiences, making her English richer and more personal. One afternoon, during a casual conversation at her language exchange group, Emma told a story from her childhood. She used a mix of phrases she had learned and expressions she made her own. Her friends laughed, asked questions, and shared similar stories. Emma felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. That night, Emma wrote in her journal, "I used to think I had to sound like someone else to be understood. Now I know that being myself is enough. My English is mine because it carries my voice, my story, my heart." Finding her own voice gave Emma a new kind of confidence. She spoke not just to be understood but to connect, to share, and to belong. Her journey was evolving again, not just learning a language but making it a true part of who she was. And with every word she spoke, Emma was becoming more herself, in English and beyond. Chapter 7: The Power of Storytelling. As Emma's confidence grew, she discovered a new truth. Language was much more than just grammar rules and vocabulary lists. It was a bridge, a way to share experiences, emotions, and ideas. It was through stories that people connected most deeply. One crisp autumn afternoon, Emma joined a small gathering at a cozy cafe, filled with fellow language learners and native speakers. She watched as a young man shared a hilarious story about a travel mishap. The group laughed heartily, nodding along as the storyteller animatedly described the chaos. Emma noticed how the pauses, tone changes, and gestures made the story come alive. It wasn't just the words, but how they were told. Inspired, Emma decided she wanted to share her own stories in English. But the thought was daunting. How could she tell stories well in a language she still felt unsure about? What if she stumbled on words or confused her listeners? Emma started small. Each evening, she wrote short stories in her journal, little snapshots of her day, memories from childhood, or funny moments. She practiced retelling these stories out loud, focusing on the flow rather than perfection. She learned to use expressions that native speakers use to start stories. You won't believe what happened. Let me tell you about, and this one time. Gradually, Emma noticed something wonderful. When she told stories, her English didn't feel forced or stiff. Her words flowed more naturally. She became less afraid of mistakes because the meaning and emotion behind the story mattered more than perfect grammar. One night, during a language exchange meetup, Emma bravely shared a story about her first day at university in her new country. She described the nervous excitement, the strange customs she didn't understand, and a kind stranger who helped her find her way. Her listeners leaned in, smiling and nodding as if they were right there with her. Afterwards, several people approached her, sharing their own first-day stories. Emma felt an incredible sense of connection, a feeling that language had opened a door to belonging. That night, Emma wrote in her journal, "Stories are the heart of communication. When I tell my stories, I am not just practicing English, I am connecting with others." That's the true meaning of sounding natural. Emma understood that storytelling was more than a skill. It was a way to make her English her own and build friendships across cultures. Her journey was no longer just about speaking English, it was about sharing her life, one story at a time. Chapter 8: The Art of Listening. Emma had come a long way in her English journey. She had learned to speak confidently, tell stories, and even find her unique voice. Yet, during a conversation with Sarah, she discovered something new. Speaking well was only one side of the coin. The other was listening. One rainy afternoon, while sharing a cup of tea, Sarah said gently, "Emma, to truly sound natural in English, you have to listen deeply. Listening shapes how you understand and respond. It's not just about hearing words, it's about catching the rhythm, the emotions, and the unspoken meaning behind them." Emma was curious but skeptical. She had always focused on speaking, thinking that if she talked more, her English would improve faster. But Sarah's words planted a seed. Determined to improve, Emma began dedicating time to listening. Not just passive listening but active, focused listening. She started with podcasts where people spoke naturally and slowly. She watched movies without subtitles, struggling at first but gradually catching more. Emma discovered something fascinating. Real English was often very different from what she had learned in books. People didn't pronounce every word clearly, they shortened phrases, merged sounds, and used slang. "I'm going to" became "I'm gonna," and "what are you doing" often sounded like "whatcha doing." These contractions and connected speech made English flow like music, smooth and fast. At first, Emma felt overwhelmed. The words seemed to blur together. But she practiced patiently, rewinding podcasts, mimicking the speakers, and trying to repeat what she heard. Listening also opened her eyes to emotions and humor. She started recognizing sarcasm, jokes, and subtle tones that changed the meaning of sentences completely. She realized that understanding these nuances was key to responding naturally. One evening, Emma attended a storytelling night in her city. She listened to various speakers sharing their tales, some funny, some touching. She noticed how they used pauses to build suspense, varied their tone to show excitement or sadness, and made eye contact with the audience to connect. Listening to these stories helped Emma understand not just what to say, but how to say it to make it feel alive. That night, she wrote in her journal, "Listening is the secret to unlocking natural English. It's the melody beneath the words, the feelings behind the sentences. When I listen well, I don't just understand English, I feel it." From then on, Emma made listening a daily habit, whether it was a song on the radio, a conversation at the cafe, or a speech on television. She learned to listen with her whole self, knowing that this was the key to speaking naturally and confidently. Her English journey was no longer just about speaking perfectly. It was about tuning in, understanding, and responding with heart and soul. Chapter 9: Embracing Culture and Confidence. Emma's journey through English had taken many turns. She had practiced speaking, embraced storytelling, and learned the art of listening. Yet, as she attended more social gatherings and made new friends, she realized that speaking English naturally wasn't only about words and sounds, it was deeply connected to culture and confidence. One Saturday afternoon, Emma was invited to a picnic hosted by her English-speaking friends. She was excited but nervous. Would she understand the jokes? Would her words sound right? Would she fit in? As the afternoon unfolded, Emma noticed the subtle ways people interacted, how they used humor to break the ice, the topics they avoided, and the polite ways they disagreed. She saw that language carried culture, and to sound natural, she needed to understand more than grammar and vocabulary. She needed to feel the culture behind the words. Emma remembered a moment when someone told a joke filled with cultural references she didn't get. Instead of laughing, she stayed silent, feeling left out. Afterward, Sarah explained, "Sometimes, to sound natural, you have to learn about the culture too. Its traditions, humor, and even its mistakes." This insight motivated Emma to dive deeper into cultural learning. She read books, watched films, and asked her friends questions about their customs and daily lives. She learned that small things, like greeting styles, expressions of politeness, and even what topics to discuss or avoid, shaped how people sounded natural. More importantly, Emma realized that confidence was key. Even if she made mistakes or didn't know every cultural nuance perfectly, being relaxed and open made her English feel genuine. When she smiled, laughed, or showed curiosity, people responded warmly. During the picnic, Emma decided to share a story about a traditional festival from her home country. She spoke slowly, choosing her words carefully but with pride. Her friends listened attentively, asked questions, and shared their own stories in return. That day, Emma felt a powerful sense of belonging. She wasn't just speaking English. She was connecting through culture and confidence. In her journal, Emma wrote, "To sound natural, I need to live the language, its culture, its people, its spirit. Confidence isn't about perfection. It's about being myself and being curious about others." Emma's journey was now about blending language and life, learning not just to speak English but to live it fully, with heart and courage. Chapter 10: Becoming Fluent, Becoming Yourself. Emma's journey with English had stretched far beyond grammar drills and vocabulary lists. It had become a journey of growth, connection, and self-discovery. Now, standing on the threshold of a new chapter in her life, Emma looked back on how far she had come and forward to where her English would take her next. She remembered her early days, the nervousness, the hesitations, and the fear of making mistakes. She thought about the countless hours practicing pronunciation, the storytelling nights, the patient listening sessions, and the cultural lessons learned from friends. But most of all, Emma realized that sounding natural in English was never about being perfect. It was about embracing her own voice, with all its unique rhythms and quirks, and allowing it to shine through the language. Fluency, Emma discovered, was not just speaking quickly or flawlessly. It was speaking freely, with confidence and authenticity. It was being able to share her stories, listen deeply, laugh genuinely, and express her thoughts without fear. One bright morning, Emma walked through the city park where she first struggled with small talk. This time, she felt at ease. She greeted strangers with a smile, joined a conversation effortlessly, and even cracked a joke that made her new friends laugh. Her English sounded natural, not because it was perfect, but because it was hers. In her journal, Emma wrote her final reflection. To sound natural in English is to be yourself, curious, confident, and courageous. Language is a bridge, not a barrier. It connects us, teaches us, and helps us grow. My English is not just words, it's my story, my culture, and my heart. And with every conversation, I become more fluent, not just in English, but in being me. Emma's journey was far from over, but she was ready. Ready to explore new opportunities, make deeper connections, and continue learning every day. Because sounding natural in English isn't a destination, it's a lifelong adventure. If you enjoyed Emma's story and want to improve your English speaking skills, start practicing listening and speaking every day. Remember, sounding natural comes from confidence, curiosity, and being yourself. Don't forget to like this video if it helped you, share it with your friends who want to speak English more naturally, and subscribe for more stories and tips to boost your English. Leave a comment below. What part of Emma's journey did you relate to the most? Or share your own experiences learning English. Keep practicing, stay confident, and I'll see you in the next story.